You know, I have all these great friends, but I don't think I ever had anything like me and Dave Martin. We were inseparable.
More than my idea of like a fantastic night would be like hanging out with Mike Lavella.
He was like, man, I have a flu, I'm sick. I'm like, lay down on my bed. And I put all 2,000 records. I'm like, 2,000 Half-Life records will cure you.
I already knew I was so damaged by records, like I wanted to know everything.
And we had this joke, like, the Half-Life records cured me.
Going to the printing place to pick up the covers and then helping him fold them or whatever it was, you know, like all that stuff was stuff that I thought was great.
When Reed Haley started the Compulsives, he opened that P.O. box. And then it became the Fives P.O. box, or the famous The Five. P.O. Box 7558, Pittsburgh, PA. You know, that was like iconic. And then it became the Mind Cure P.O. box. And then it was on our records, and it was on all the Half-Life stuff. And it was like, that was the P.O. box. And every day, you know, back then, like pre-internet, like any communication you had with anyone in the world was through the mail. And I'd go every day, and it would be full, completely full of mail every day. And so when, you know, when I left, I'm like, you know, Dave Martin, here is the key to P.O. Box 7558.
Indie rock was definitely like something that was real and happening. And so I got to know a lot of those people. Once I worked with Carl, obviously got to know him very well. And I remember just being blown away by some of his songs. And so I asked him, what's up with that baseball card song? Is it gonna be on a record? And he's like, well, I don't know. Well, I'll put it out. I called up Mike and I said, what do you think if I called it Mind Cure?
There just couldn't have been anyone else to do it. I don't know what to say.
I was off to the races. This, Carl Hendricks single, and then the Speaking Canaries.
So Speaking Canaries was always a side project of mine. It wasn't, you know, it didn't have the ammunition that, you know, Caballero had.
Damon and I were pretty close, and he had recorded this record, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
The first record we put out when I started composing an actual band that could perform live, that record came out early '93.
It's one of my favorite records ever out of Pittsburgh. JT sent me these tapes, and there were these two songs, and I was like, wow, those songs are amazing, it's great, you know, and I was like, you want to put out a record? And he was like, yeah. And I think I assumed that it would be a Brother JT record, but, you know, he told me, he's like, oh, it doesn't really feel like Brother JT, you know, and it's just me, so it's not the Original Sins. He's like, but I have another name for it, and I was like, okay. I ended up putting out the Crush Nova single. If it had been called a Brother JT record, I still wouldn't have a couple hundred copies of it. But if I had to pick a record to have a couple hundred copies of, I'm fine with this one. And I got to know JT, you know, and then he was like, oh, I'm in this other band. So they sent me these songs, and I thought these two songs were great. Another Carl single, just because, you know, Carl had some other songs, and I was like, let's do another single. I really wanted to do a Cynics record, and I had heard the first Cynics, and I was like, yeah, that record's pretty cool. It's like, I don't know. Are you allowed to like it? Is it punk? What is it? We don't know. All of these questions that seem so ludicrous now. Speaking Canaries' second album, Songs for the Terrestrially Challenged.
We recorded it in '93 and it came out 2 years later.
We knew we wanted a paste on cover again. I ordered 500 plain white sleeves. I was like, wow, look at that spine, it's fantastic. And I was like, it kind of stinks that it's just gonna be blank. And then I was like, oh, maybe it doesn't have to be blank. You know, I got out a fine point Sharpie, and I just put the band name and the album, you know, the catalog number, the label name right there, boom. And I was like, look at that, that looks great. How could your time be worth more than how good that looks? There was a drawing that Damon wanted, which was an anvil about to fall on a heart. And so I was just goofing around, and I just did this all by hand. I was like, so Damon, this is kind of what I had in mind. Like, yeah, that looks pretty cool. And I was like, okay, so we'll get this and we'll make copies of it and we'll paste it on. It was too expensive to do color copies because we had already spent a lot on the printing for the front cover. I did it by hand, and then it was like, well, I don't know, I guess I'll just keep going. And it took the better part of a month. This is the best Speaking Canaries record, I think, of all the Speaking Canaries, which are all great. 5 singles and 2 LPs, that's it, boom. And there were some planned records that never came to be. When you have kids or whatever and then decide to move to the most expensive city in America, that kind of get pushed off to the side. In 1995, Matador called me and they're like, you know, we want to talk to you about this job. We always expected it to not last, and sort of, you know, kind of been waiting for, to be forced out of New York, to have to move back to Pittsburgh. Always sort of depressed that that's never happened. But, we're still here, so. And people still pay me to talk about music, so I can't complain too much.